Well, thank you very much for the warm introduction and good morning. Um, so yeah, I think that was really awesome to open up with a definition for natural capital and thinking about how the value of an asset, which is a store of wealth that provides benefits through time, might depend on its position, its location, its quality, its extent. And so today I'm going to talk about some work that I've done that I'm broadly calling the value and configuration of coastal natural capital. And the takeaway from this work is to really think about how we use economic tools to derive values in dollars or pounds or monetary units, and how those might be sensitive to the methods that we use and how new data and technology are allowing us to operationalize this in a way that is supportive of broader sustainability goals. So the first kind of comment here is that there are many reports like this one that ascribe an economic value to an ecosystem asset. And this one in particular talks about the value of the Great Barrier Reef, which has an icon asset value of $56 billion, supports 64,000 jobs, and contributes $6.4 billion to the Australian economy. One of the problems with reports like this is that they happen exactly once. There's no follow-up. And this isn't as informative as repeated measures of ecosystem value, of ecosystem services, using consistent methodologies that can tell us something about change through time. As we heard yesterday, different people have different sets of values for ecosystem assets, for coastal ecosystem assets in particular. We have many different types of users, and our methods might only capture a subset of those values. And so this tells us something about potentially a subset of values using a particular methodology, but otherwise doesn't give us any information about kind of how the system is changing, how fast things are moving. The other thing that I don't particularly like about these statements of the overall value of an asset is that there's probably someone in the world who has 56 billion to spend on something like Twitter or the Great Barrier Reef or whatever, and we might not want a person to come along and just purchase it. And certainly that would tell us something about this number. So what do? I leverage high-resolution geospatial data about the extent, quality, and condition of natural assets. And in particular, I focus on beach sand because beach sand it's a nice asset in the sense that if I move a bucket of beach sand from one place to the other, the set of ecosystem functions, biogeophysical interactions that it changes isn't maybe as difficult, though still complex, as moving something from a wetland that's biotic. So I work on beach sand, and I think about how we can use this high resolution geospatial data instead of on the ground measures of beach sand that have been done if anyone's gone and measured beach width in person. It's expensive, it's costly, and it only gives us a limited amount of data to make these conclusions. I couple this information with high resolution socioeconomic data on property values and their characteristics. So the structure of homes and businesses, how much they sell for, their transactions value through time. And so my research question broadly is, how might management of the coastal zone change or differ when we account for different sets of ecosystem services, different market sizes, so who are we managing for, and the assets that we include. And so I bring these economic methods again with the high resolution geospatial data to come up with these tools to value natural capital and to represent them in the same type of, say, financial or business decisions that we have in practice. And so the impact is going to be improving spatial decision-making and coastal planning and helping adapt to global change and mitigate climate pressures. So I use hedonic property valuation, describing the relationship between residential property values and their attributes using constituents of these coastal areas. This is a US context that I'll present today, where I link attribute data from LiDAR estimates from the US Geological Service to property values from CoreLogic and ZTrax, which is the Zillow data set that is phasing out in September, sadly. And more importantly, what I'm going to do here is show that if we use one set of methodologies from the literature, we'll show that an asset that we all know is valuable in coastal areas, and that's beach dune ecosystems, and in particular dunes, aren't valuable at all. And I'll show how thinking about the mapping of assets to services, a more complex system that generates multiple services from a portfolio of assets, can help us disentangle that flow by modeling their provision kind of in a more formal way. So there are 3 case studies. I might not get to all 3 case studies, and I'll keep an eye on the time, but I'll start with the most important, which is this one in North Carolina. And so my framework is to model the transaction price of properties, which will include the characteristics of the property, so a 3-story building, but might also take into account view sheds and aesthetic values, as we've heard from yesterday. There are going to be locational characteristics related to the beach. So I have this set of disabled parking, beach showers, etc. And then I also explicitly account for a mapping of storm protection values as a function of beach width and different dune dimensions. Recreation values as a function of beach width, where here in North Carolina, the dunes are protected areas, so there's no recreation happening on dunes, and a view shed, which is just a function of how tall the dune is. And using a semi-log hedonic property specification, which is just a fancy way of mapping the attribute levels to a change in price, I try to map these characteristics to these 3 sets of services: storm protection, recreation, and view shed. And indeed, this has been done before in North Carolina, and the results found that dunes don't have a significantly positive effect on property prices. And so one might conclude that we're not capturing some favorable constituent of their value. However, if we interact property characteristics with beach attributes in such a way that is informed by the provision of these services, and what I mean by that is that a home behind a very tall dune is not going to be able to see the ocean, so its view shed won't change as the variation in the dune attributes change. However, the storm protection value that's attributable to that property will change as these dune features increase. So if you can't see the ocean, a taller dune isn't going to change your ability to not see the ocean anymore, but it will give you more benefits in terms of coastal storm protection and flood risk. And when we do this, we come up with now not 0 values, but we show that there's a huge difference. These are high magnitude service flows between homes that have view sheds that aren't fully blocked, whereby a taller dune obstructs their view of the ocean and is a disamenity, right? The dune, a marginally taller dune, is not a good thing for these homeowners, and their revealed preference is negative $20,000 per foot of dune in the transaction price. So properties, all else equal, sell for $20,000 less behind marginally taller dunes if their view shed can be blocked. If we have a 30-foot dune sitting between the ocean and a 1-story building, that property owner already has a fully blocked view shed, and they would be willing to pay almost the same magnitude, or rather, the dune feature is capitalized in these property values at about positive $20,000, and that's independent of the number of stories that the building is. So this is a 2-story building behind a 3-story dune, potentially. And so what we can do is advance on existing work that relates the width of beaches to property values and complete a diagram that the existing literature gives us, which says we don't really know values for the attributes of dunes as they capitalize into property values. We can only talk about the relationship between beach width and property values. And here we can come up with a really rich picture that shows that dunes and beach dune ecosystems are very important to coastal homeowners, but so are coastal view sheds. So are some of these aesthetic properties of coastal areas. And so this is kind of a way of thinking structurally about the types of flows and integrating that into the economic models and tools that we use. In other case studies, so I have just a couple of seconds left, so I'll only talk about this briefly because I think this is particularly important. I compare capitalization of beach sand for 2 different types of properties. One are properties where sand is generated, or sand accretes naturally due to longshore flow of sand, and other where sand bypass is used to move sand from one side of an inlet where that sand flow is interrupted to the other. And this is done in a way such that the government provides an otherwise naturally occurring process, which is moving sand from one place to another, and find that there's a gap between the values that individuals have that capitalize in their property values for sand that's transported to their location by sand bypass, by a man-made process, versus naturally moving sand. This could be because people are scared that the government's going to default on their promise to move sand from one place to another, so risk in management, or it could be something about differing beliefs in future losses over time. And so I think quantifying gaps between natural attributes, natural assets, and the substitutes that we have for them, substituting natural sand flow for man-made movement of sand, might be important for thinking about climate adaptation. And so to kind of close, I think heterogeneity in ecosystem service flows is particularly important. And when we do these kind of benefits transfer exercises, we might be overlooking a lot of really important and potentially high magnitude service flows that in that first case study offset on average to zero and gave us a poor picture of the value of coastal beach dune ecosystems. So thank you very much. I'll leave it at that. I do have to catch a train later, so if I'm not around, please feel free to email me. And thanks for the opportunity to share the work.